Did you know that every single day you are being guided towards your greatest purpose? Every step you take is a signpost pointing you in the direction of where you were meant to be. Our story begins with a young man named Tom who loved nothing more than to spend time in the mountains. From the time he was a little boy, he would beg his father to take him hiking along the nearby trails, and his dad would happily oblige. They would set off for hours, walking in silence, side by side, as they climbed higher and higher above the world. He could no longer see the path in front of him or the rock formations that marked the way. Tom's heartbeat quickened. He remembered his dad telling him once, "Sometimes you must trust what feels right, not just what you see." So he closed his eyes, listening to the mountain. But from the quiet voice inside, the part of us that remembers paths walked before, lessons learned in silence. When he finally descended from the mountain, the sun was low, painting the sky and the mountain gold. The fog had lifted, and the trail back seemed clearer than ever before. He felt lighter, as if a weight he hadn't realized he was carrying had been lifted. But the lessons he learned on that mountain continued to guide him, reminding him that sometimes the most important journeys are the ones that lead us not just to a physical destination, but also to the depths of our own resilience and intuition. Whenever he faced challenges or uncertainties, he drew strength from the memory of that day. And whenever his path seemed lost in the fog, he remembered the Sentinel and the sunlit ridge, knowing that beyond the mist lay a clearer path illuminated by the light of his inner wisdom. He found himself smiling more, his steps a bit lighter, his eyes searching the horizon with a newfound curiosity. And don't forget to subscribe for more content. Have a great day. Whenever he faced a challenging decision or felt lost in a confusing situation, he would close his eyes and remember that foggy morning on Gray Peak. He recalled the moment when he had chosen to trust his intuition, the feeling of relief when he had found the familiar pine tree, and the profound silence of the sunlit ridge. In those moments of clarity, he knew he had a choice: to let fear and doubt cloud his path, or to trust the quiet voice within that knew the way. Now that the sun was setting, Tom hurried down the path, eager to reach the car before it got dark. But even in the gathering dusk, he noticed how the fading light painted the trees in hues of crimson and violet. The air was cooler now, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. The sound of the nearby river echoed through the valleys, a constant companion on his descent. As he walked, Tom thought about his journey, the fear, the doubt, and the choice to trust his intuition. He knew that this experience had changed him in some way, but he couldn't quite put his finger on it yet. He drove home, his mind still replaying the events of the day. That evening, Tom sat at his desk, the events of the day still fresh in his mind. He dipped his pen into the ink, letting the nib guide his hand across the paper. As he wrote, words flowed from his pen, forming sentences, weaving a tale of his journey to Gray Peak. He wrote about the peace he found in the stillness of the mountains, the uncertainty that clouded his path, and the moment when he chose to follow his intuition instead of relying solely on his sight. He wrote until the moon was high in the sky, the soft glow of the night light casting shadows on the wall as he relived his adventure once again. Far off, he could hear the faint sounds of the world he had left behind, the rush of the waterfall seeming louder now because of the sudden silence everywhere else. He titled it The Path Beyond the Fog, for it was a journey not just through a physical landscape, but also through the fog of doubt and fear that sometimes obscures our path. With his story complete, Tom put it away, tucking the paper into a folder filled with other stories he had written over the years. He knew that he might never show anyone this story, but that didn't matter. The act of writing it had brought him a sense of closure, a feeling of having made sense of his experience. Sitting on a flat stone, Tom closed his eyes, letting the wind on his face. The silence was deep and gentle, like an old friend's embrace. It was a silence that spoke volumes, a silence that sang the song of ages past. Tom could almost hear the whispers of the mountain itself, the stories it had to tell, the secrets it held dear. In that silence, he found an answer, a truth that resonated deep within his soul. He realized that sometimes the loudest noise comes not from what we hear, but from what we choose to ignore. Sometimes the greatest adventure is not about reaching a destination, but about the journey within. Sometimes the path less traveled is the one that leads us back to ourselves. He listened to the whisper of wind through the needles, the distant drip of melting snow. He tried to tune out the pounding of his heart, the rapid beat of his blood in his ears. Slowly, a memory surfaced. He remembered his father's words. Sometimes you must trust what feels right, not just what you see. Taking a deep breath, Tom stepped onto the narrower trail, the one that somehow felt familiar. This was not how he remembered the trail. Suddenly, the rocky path forked unexpectedly, and what made matters worse was that both directions looked the same: pale, wet stone disappearing into gray mist. Tom checked his map and compass, but the fog distorted everything. Even his map seemed useless now. Doubt crept into his mind. What if he chose the wrong path? Would he get lost in the fog? It was in these moments that Tom felt truly free, far from the noise and distractions of everyday life. You are walking on the path that only you can walk. A path that has been laid out for you long before you were even born. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. The fog pressed close, making him feel both alone and strangely connected to everything around him. Tom walked on, his resolve wavering at times, but his curiosity piqued by the mystery of the path. Then, through the swirling gray, he caught a glimpse of something dark and solid, an old pine tree twisted by wind, its bark scarred by lightning. Tom remembered it from years ago. His father had called it the Sentinel. Relief washed over him. He was on the right path. Yet most of us fail to recognize these signs because we're too busy focusing on all the noise around us. We get caught up in the opinions of others, the expectations of society, the limitations that we ourselves have placed upon our shoulders. And in doing so, we lose sight of the clear signs that are guiding us every step of the way. Hi, everyone. Now, by the time Tom had turned 17, he had explored almost every inch of those mountains with his dad. Together, they had climbed the highest peaks and crossed the trickiest ridges. It was a trail he had walked many times before, but today he was taking the journey alone. As he began his ascent, he noticed that the clouds hung low that day, turning the mountain paths into shifting rivers of fog. At first, this did not bother him at all. In fact, he quite liked it. Tom breathed in the crisp air and the scent of pine and felt a sense of calm wash over him. And now, since his father had passed away, Tom found himself drawn back to the mountains once more. There was a certain peak that he and his father had climbed many times before that he wanted to visit. It was called Gray Peak. The name didn't match its appearance, as the peak was actually covered in white quartz that glistened like freshly fallen snow. And he had begged his father to change its name to White Peak, but his dad had just chuckled and said, "No, my boy, some things are best left as they are." The name Gray Peak fits perfectly, don't you think? And so it remained. One early morning, with his backpack slung over his shoulder, Tom set off to climb Gray Peak. However, as he climbed higher, the fog thickened, hiding the trail he remembered so clearly, and stopped, took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. The stones beneath his feet were uneven, yet they felt right beneath his boots, as if welcoming him back. Tom continued on the path, trusting his instincts. Beyond the tree, the trail curved upward, breaking through the fog into a sunlit ridge. And in that moment, sitting on that silent ridge, Tom understood. True guidance sometimes comes not from maps or signs. When he finally reached his car, his hands were steady, his steps sure. When he finished writing, he read over his story, a sense of satisfaction washing over him. The next day, As Tom went about his life, he couldn't shake off the feeling that something had shifted within him. Years passed, turning Tom's story into a cherished memory. The end. Thank you for watching this animated short film. If you enjoyed this story, please consider sharing it with someone who needs to hear it.